This is the Norris Group's Real Estate Investor Radio Show, the award-winning show dedicated to thought leaders shaping the real estate industry and local experts revealing their insider tips to succeed in an ever-changing real estate market. Hosted by author, investor, and hard money lender, Bruce Norris.
The Norris Group proudly presents our 14th annual award-winning event, I Survived Real Estate. Industry experts join Bruce and Aaron Norris to discuss evolving industry trends, real estate bubbles, inflation, and opportunities emerging for real estate professionals. All proceeds from the event benefit Make-A-Wish and St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
Hi, thanks for joining us. My name is Bruce Norris, and today our special guest is Paul Herrera. Paul serves as an advocate for realtors and their clients on local issues, helping to preserve and protect property rights and value of homeownership. Working with colleagues at the California Association of REALTORS and the National Association of REALTORS, Paul helps members make a difference for their clients at a local, state, and federal level. The combination of mass media experience, local experience, policy and political background, and understanding of real estate issues prepared him to lead IVAR's government affairs and communication efforts through coalition building, strong messaging, and technical understanding. Thank you so much for joining us again, Paul, and welcome back. You know what's interesting about what you said, affordable housing. So 10 years ago, when the foreclosure crisis happened, so affordable housing doesn't have to be built from scratch. Sometimes it exists in the marketplace. And yes. So at the time when we had, the panel that we had was the top person, it's a mortgage collaborative and Fannie Mae and so forth, have a nothing down loan program. This house that was 400 grand is 100 grand. How many lives would have been changed? And just, okay, here, you get a 4% mortgage and 100 grand house. That's affordable housing. We didn't have to lose any money on it. It didn't have to be tax subsidized. The marketplace presented it. And because we didn't do that, Wall Street came in and bought hundreds of thousands of them. Yeah. And, but we do have affordable housing in a sense of interest rates. So yes. Once again, and I literally, this was probably 2 or 3 months ago, was invited to speak to the president of Fannie Mae on a one-on-one meeting with Doug Duncan. And that was still the discussion because, yes, you have expensive home prices, but you have world record low interest rates. So it's worth the risk to get somebody to own a home because it's also a societal issue where they feel like they're part of the system. They've got some of the goodies. Their payments going to equity build, and they actually know they're going to stay there. And all those things matter to a society, So I guess sometimes maybe it's too late in the cycle because the price is too crazy, but there'll be another cycle. And we ought to take some lessons that we didn't take advantage of and go, okay, well, now I see it again. Let's implement that because it's pretty hard when people don't have a choice. I can't afford rent and I can't buy. What do I do?
Right. Yeah, because 10 years ago you couldn't get a mortgage, and you had a lot of individuals. Well, a lot of people who had jobs but let go of a house because their house went down value by 50%. Yeah. And decided I'm just going to let this one go. You lock people out of the market.
Well, but see, there's another way to solve that, and we did it in the 80s. And again, this was another meeting in Washington, D.C., sitting in front of the top person in FHA. I said, how about you just let everybody take over the loan subject to? In other words, they don't have to qualify. They send you a $45 check, and they say Paul Herrera's name's on the loan. Bruce Norris is buying it. Here's $45. Paul Herrera's off the liability, and I buy it. Done. I don't have to qualify for anything. I just make the payment until I don't, and someone else takes my place. Instead, you have all these foreclosures. There's some states that had a bunch of foreclosures that didn't have to happen. Texas was one of them. Texas homes didn't really go up. We were 1031 exchanging from California in 2006 to brand new brick houses at 125 in Texas. So they didn't have a foreclosure crisis, but even the ones that went in foreclosure, they should have just been able to walk to another owner without ever reaching a foreclosure process. So I think that's, it's interesting. And I'm sure this happens because you're sort of in a unique blend, I would think, in the legislature world, is that you have some practical experience in other and other, like the real estate people, you get a lot of input on what's maybe a good option we're not implementing. And I don't know how receptive they are to things that actually would work just because they haven't heard of them,
Our organization is actually pretty unique in the Capitol as well as in Congress and at the local level, because we don't ask for a whole lot. Most groups that have representation, lobbyists that are walking around in the state capitol, they're asking for a bunch of money in one form or another. We're not. I've never gone to any lawmaker at any level and said, hey, can you pass this bill that's going to appropriate this many hundreds of millions of dollars to our members in this way? That's not a question we've ever asked. Almost everything that we ask for is, can we do something to make it easier for people to qualify for a loan, for people to be able to build housing so that we have it for sale, for people to be able to function in a more frictionless way, so that it's easier to be a homeowner, enjoy your property rights, and transact. That tends to be we're in a problem solving mode. I'll give you an example right now. We're kind of in the middle between the insurance commissioner and the insurance industry on fire insurance in California.
Right.
Fire insurance is becoming a crisis level in any community where you have fire risk, which includes a lot of foothill areas that are more urbanized areas than you would imagine. In Riverside, there are people who are getting policy cancellation notices who are by the riverbed. This is not an area that just burns like a forest, but this is happening everywhere. And so you have an insurance commissioner who wants to crack down on the industry, says, if you're not going to offer fire insurance, then you can just take your auto insurance, home insurance, and everything else and walk around the state.
Wow.
You have an insurance industry that says, we're not going to give you access to the data and the things that we've got. We're going to keep a black box over everything. And you know what? You figure out how you're going to offer insurance. And we're in the middle saying, guys, we need people to be able to afford insurance so they can own a house, so they can get a mortgage, so they can refinance a mortgage. We just need it to work. We don't, we understand there's challenges. Let's work through those. It's not good enough to have, side A yell at side B for the benefit of Twitter followers or whatever, performance things happening.
That doesn't solve us.
We just got to solve the problem. And so that is our role, where we try to be problem solvers on, let's be real about how this affects, middle income, average individuals who are just trying to live their lives.
What effect do you see 3D printed housing have in the next 5 or 10 years?
It's really hard to say for me, because when you look at any legislation that moves around the state of California that affects the building of homes, the trades get very deeply involved.
Okay.
And they are very defensive of anything that might lower the need for skilled tradespeople, or their ability to get prevailing wage or very strong wages in the state of California. I haven't seen to what extent they will engage on something like 3D printed housing in order to avoid the reduction in labor costs. But they've engaged in everything else. And they're very, very powerful voice in the state of California. So if it's something that they decide they're not that interested in, then 3D printed houses would at least significantly reduce one of the major cost centers, which is the cost of labor. Not just the cost of labor, but the availability of labor in the state of California. It's not everything, obviously, because you still have to put the house in place. You still have to do certain things. But it would reduce some of that. You still have to put the house someplace. And citing the land and getting approvals to do so is not easy. So are we going to solve that problem?
Is there even the will to solve that? And I had an interesting conversation with a lady that used to watch our dogs, and she graduated from college. She said, I won't be able to watch your dogs this weekend. I have an assignment. Well, what's your assignment? Well, I take a lawn chair out, and this was sort of in the middle of nowhere, maybe, 29 palms look-alike, with a high-powered binocular. And her whole job for the weekend was to see if she could see anything move. and had a very high-tech camera so she could take a picture of something that would stop a development. That was her job.
Yeah.
So, wow. Yeah. She no longer watched my dogs, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, we have to find a way to reform CEQA. We have to find a way to make it easier to build. And I don't know what that path is, because the California Environmental Quality Act, when it comes to housing development, isn't used primarily to protect the environment.
No.
It's used primarily to stop development or to negotiate other things, right?
Yeah.
So you negotiate hey, we'll look the other way on whatever it is this is. We're concerned about the noise created that is going to drive away whatever creature we're talking about. But we'll stop being concerned if you put $500,000 into our trust account that mostly pays legal bills for this attorney, right?
That's right.
Or if you agree to the labor contract, that the project labor agreement that we're putting forward. That I wish was not a thing that was happening, but it is.
When you go around the states and speak, you meet up with some bits of information from different areas and laws that passed. And, that was one of the, when we had the legislation panel that you were on, we had trying to figure out, okay, how were laws passed? I'm really curious about the process because some of them seem dedicated to not honoring property owners' rights, but honoring occupant rights. And that's a troubling thing in California. If I have somebody that arbitrarily moves into my house, that I have a vacant house and I'm having it painted, and the next thing I know, somebody's changed the lock and they're there, that journey is very different in Florida than it is in California.
Well, you recall that we had a real problem with that when the market crash took place. And you had all these vacant houses, and people. Well, it happened in a number of ways. One was people created fake leases.
Sure.
For vacant houses, and
trust me, I've seen them.
yeah. Police would come out and say, "Hey, you're supposed to be here." And they'd show them a lease, and police would say, "Well, I can't arbitrate this, so you got to go to deal with this."
That's a civil matter.
Yeah. Now, we got a lot of cooperation on that, in particularly Riverside and San Bernardino County. And so we were able to address a lot of that. So that it was more streamlined. Other areas, I don't know how it worked in LA, for instance. I know they weren't fantastic, but they got a lot better as time went on during that downturn, to where they did respond much faster.
When you say responded quicker, did they still have the right to make a decision to say that's not a real rental contract?
Not on the spot, but the action happened much faster.
Okay.
To where as a property owner, you could show them documentation that would end up much faster than it would in the past.
Okay.
And I'm not exactly sure where that is right now. I mean, I got a call about a month ago about a property in Moreno Valley where the seller sold the property, and then their purchase fell through. It wasn't contingent. And they said, "Hey, guess what? We're not leaving, even though we closed." And it's recorded. And so they tried to call the sheriff's office, and the sheriff said, "We don't know what to do here." And they said, "Well, they have no valid lease agreement. There's no lease of any kind. They're just refusing to leave." And that I actually don't know what the outcome was. Last time I spoke with the broker involved, looks like they had to go to eviction court in order to deal with it. Yeah. California does favor certainly somebody who initially entered a property under legal circumstances, even if those legal circumstances no longer exist.
That probably would be sort of the case in point, let's say, of a foreclosed property with an occupant that is a carryover owner that lost the house. So that journey, if you have a business model of buying foreclosures at trustee sales, and you have an attorney that just says, "Oh boy, this is going to be fun. Let's do everything we can in the book." Literally a year later, and $50,000 happens to get them out.
Yeah, and it's a world that you're seeing rental owners have to enter into much more so right now than it did in the past.
Sure.
The costs are much higher. One of the challenges with say the eviction moratorium is you look at the legislation makes sense until it starts being implemented and you run into problems. So legislation on the eviction moratorium in California says that if you qualify, you've been impacted by COVID,
Right.
then you're protected by the eviction moratorium. In which case, you should also be eligible for the money, which
Right.
makes your landlord whole. So therefore, you're not staying for free. You're the government's paying your
Right.
bill.
Correct.
And if you don't qualify, then you're not protected by the eviction moratorium. But because of the gray areas, which you wouldn't think exist, you get a lot of, none of box A or none of box B. But the bottom line is this property where the owner needs the money is producing no revenue.
Right.
There's no rent coming in
Right.
because there's always gaps that form once this goes into a court system or even a backup in court system where you're not even getting a court date for months.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's as people ask me all the time, why are you in Florida? And that was one of the main reasons that I think Florida respects ownership rights more than occupancy rights. And we just had more than a few large checks chasing what was rightfully ours. And that was impeded by the process of saying, well, that's in doubt.
Yeah, I don't know how to manage this debate right now because I think fundamentally the thought of California lawmakers on the left has a very complicated relationship right now with housing. And one of those complications is that I think it fundamentally believes, that group fundamentally believes that housing should not be a business. Housing should not be a profit center.
That's scary.
And when you start from that point of view, but at the same time, they want private developers to, out of their own pocket, build housing that people can afford, right?
Exactly.
So how do we do this? Because I do, when we talk about market forces and business forces, the conversation doesn't go much further because of this disdain for the idea that housing is a business.
Well, it's interesting, again, when you speak somewhere that you don't live, and I'm trying to think of the city it was, but I was up in Northern California, and I got told that there was a law that was passed there that if you had a vacant lot that you didn't use, that you were fined $6,000 a year. I think it's Oakland. So literally, if you have a vacant lot, in addition to your property tax, you get a $6,000 fine for not using it, not building on it. And I'm just like, how in the heck did that come about? And then I thought to my own inventory, I have some lots that I've had for a long time in the Quail Valley that don't perk, and the area doesn't have sewers. So it's just holding the world together until they have sewers, which they're now in process. But if you were going to charge me 30 grand a year to keep those 5 lots, I just said, hey, they're yours. And that's when it hit me. Oh my gosh, is that the goal? Is to take the dirt so the city or county has it so they can do affordable housing? That just felt really bad to me.
I'm not sure it's that thought out. So when people start putting together the policies into a coherent master plan that goes into an actual outcome, that's where I tend to say, I think you're giving them more credit.
Okay, they just wanted to see if they could chase 6 grand, I guess.
They look at the start point and end point of this particular policy quite often in absence of what incentives are created by this policy. Just, we want people to build on lots. How to get people to build on lots? Let's fine them for not building on lots.
Is there a room that these meetings are held? I'd love to just have a mic in there.
I mean, you can actually log on to the legislature right now and watch their hearings on some of these bills, even some of the replays. I was watching one yesterday in which a lawmaker, they were talking about grant funding for affordable housing. And a lawmaker asked, how much more is our labor costing because we apply prevailing wage to all these projects, and how much more housing could we build if we could lower our labor costs? And they refused to answer the question. They said, that's a hypothetical question.
Wow.
And we don't hypotheticals. Like, your labor cost on a project is a hypothetical question.
Wow.
Of course it's not. I mean, it is in California because they're not going
Exactly.
to pass the legislation without the prevailing wage requirement. So it is hypothetical in the state of California.
Right.
But the idea that you don't study the cost of any factor that is a major input to the production of something that you're asking for and paying for is not hypothetical.
No, that's a very interesting comment and pretty telling. That's for sure.
But you get a lot of this in these discussions. I mean, boy, I'm on a working group right now in the city, and we're in the early stages of trying to figure out building decarbonization, which is something that's going to happen. Which means basically you shut off the gas at some point. You know, that they want new buildings to not have gas. They want everything electrified so that it can be powered off sustainable energy.
So, okay, sustainable energy as in
solar, wind, geothermal, you know, things that don't burn fossil fuels.
Okay.
So eventually, this is what California's doing. Under current reality, no.
Okay. Okay. Just
long term, it's where California is going to go. I mean, decarbonization will happen in California. The timeline is the only thing in question.
All right.
So it requires a lot of retrofits of existing housing. So whether that means changing out the stove and appliances from gas to electric, or whether it means outfitting, upgrading the panels, or there's a number of things that have to happen with existing, especially older stock housing, to bring it up to date. And one of the individuals in the working group said, how do we make sure that landlords don't pass these costs to the tenants? And I let it go because we got a long ways to go, so I'm not going to make a big stink out of it right now. But in my head, I wanted to say, precisely what method are you thinking about here?
Yeah.
You know, what are you asking be done here? Because you're imposing what is a 5, maybe 6-figure cost on the property owner, and then saying you can't recover it. You just have to swallow it. And you know, I'm always a little resistant when people say, well, if you add $10,000 to this, to the cost of producing a house, then you're going to raise the cost of the house by $10,000. Because it's not exactly true, right? Whether it's rental or whether it's ownership housing, the owner who sells it or rents it is going to get whatever the market will bear.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't matter what matter what something costs you.
Yeah, if they thought they would get a lot higher rents, and they put up much more money into it, and at the end it's lower than they thought, tough. They're going to have to swallow that.
Yeah, and you know what you just stated is true with green improvements. So
yeah.
People want them,
yeah,
but won't pay a dime for them.
Right. What happens is that you raise the floor at which the housing is even feasible to be built.
Correct. That's right.
To the point that moderate income to even above moderate income housing just can't be built. It doesn't exist at all. So your starting price point, you end up with a $550,000 single bedroom, shelter,
right,
cost, where it could be significantly lower than that if you didn't have all these other mandates that were part of the process.
Well, Paul, I've enjoyed batting it around with you once again. Is there anything urgent that my investors need to know they're going to be decided the next couple of days?
Well, at the federal level, I'm sure they're following the infrastructure bill and the ways that the federal government's looking to fund a potential $3.5 trillion spending package, because that pay for includes provisions to cap or eliminate 1031 exchanges, to cap or eliminate stepped up basis, to cap or eliminate, to double capital gains taxes by making them ordinary income. We actually feel really good about where we are on that proposal. and that I don't think it's going to pass with any of those provisions intact.
Well, what's interesting is, so there has been time in our history where capital gains was equal to the highest level of tax. It didn't raise more revenue. People just didn't sell their stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Which is what, 1031 exchanges.
If you do away with 1031 exchanges, okay, the apartment owner is going to go, all right, well, never mind. I'll just keep it.
Yeah. As an example, the meetings we've had about these issues among California lawmakers have been particularly productive because this state is more impacted, than say Indiana, right? The amount of housing increase in value would lock inventory off the marketplace if suddenly you had to realize all those gains when you decided to sell the 8-unit complex because you wanted to trade it in for something else. You just would stop that process, as you just mentioned.
Absolutely.
The capital gains issue.
It would hurt the realtor and all those industries.
Yeah, title industries, the inspectors, contractors that get involved in renovating properties as they turn over. We found that, I don't know if you have this figure, 1031 exchanges, 40% of the 1031 exchanges in the country happen in California. This is where those live.
Do they, now that it's where they originate, do they buy something in the state or out of state? I'm just curious.
So they involve California real estate. So 40% of the transfers.
Okay, right. The sellers.
In or out.
In or out. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, in or out. Okay. 40%. Wow, that's a big number.
Yeah, they're either selling things out of California in order to buy, like as I'm sure you did, looking to invest in Florida and other places, or maybe they're selling out of other places coming into California, or they're within the state. But 40% of the 1031 exchanges done nationally are connected to California real estate, which means they're connected to California real estate professionals. So we're counting on having a handful of California lawmakers stay with us on this bill, and they have. I've had great discussions with members of Congress in which I feel that we're not going to see 1031 exchanges go anywhere.
Are they bringing up a wealth tax for the state of California anymore?
At the state level?
Yes.
There's nothing in legislation that's going to pass right now. Not while the governor is facing a recall in 7 days. In 2 weeks, I don't know, but not in the next 7 days.
Okay. I mean, that was on the docket a year ago, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's a big deal. I mean, when you talk to especially the young staffs of lawmakers, young, eager, well-meaning staffs of lawmakers, they look at wealth inequality, which is an issue, and say, well, how do we use government to fix this? Which basically means, how do we take the money from those who have it and give it to those who don't? Yeah,
who are already paying, 0.5% of the households pay 42% of California's tab. And
right.
And the largest number of billionaires exist in California. So you got 160 some billionaires, California, that's going to say, you're going to tax my wealth every year. I got some options here.
Yeah, I mean, it's why California has a massive budget surplus. When COVID started, they projected about a $58 billion budget deficit on a $230 billion budget.
Yeah.
And when the math all added up, the state ended up with about a $78 billion surplus, more money they can actually legally keep because the bills are paid for by those who have stuff, right? And assets did very, very well during COVID.
Exactly.
I mean, which is a source of consternation, when some people did very, very well during COVID and people who sell their labor for a living, didn't do quite as well. But, it's a challenge we have to face.
Joey, did you have anything you wanted to ask?
Well, I just had a thought, 40% of the 1031s in California, well, you have to leave something that's more valuable so that you don't pay taxes. So that's probably why California is leading the way in the 1031s, right?
Right. I mean, if your mom and dad, got a portfolio of 3 or 4 houses in Orange County in 1975 that became rentals over the years, that they bought for $100,000 each, and now they're about at 1.5 million a piece. That's a story that's not that unusual. Even if you have one or two rentals in Alameda, that was working class neighborhood where you could buy something for $75,000 40 years ago, and now if you burn the house down, it's 1.2 million. That's something that happens a lot in the state. The Rust Belt doesn't have the same level, as a for instance. So if you don't have 1031 exchanges in California, you're not going to transfer those assets.
No. There's no way.
You're looking at a tax, and especially if the capital gains tax is now
A double
40%.
whammy. Good luck with the last 2 days of the legislation.
And look for the Norris Group. Our new company is going to be retro gas to electric in the future coming up.
That'll be a side business. Great.
It's coming quick, faster than you would imagine.
Paul, have a great day.
Thanks, Paul.
All right. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Joey.
See iSurvivedRealEstate.com for event details, information on all our generous sponsors, and to connect with our speakers.
For more information on hard money loans and upcoming events with the Norris Group, check out thenorrisgroup.com. For information on passive investing with trust deeds, visit tngtrustdeeds.com.
The Norris Group originates and services loans in California and Florida under California DRE License 012-19911, Florida Mortgage Lender License 1577, and NMLS License 1623669. For more information on hard money lending, go to thenorrisgroup.com and click the Hard Money tab.